That's all good. So what I'll do is I'm just going to roll through my whole presentation pretty much, but I'll encourage you to just take a couple of notes along the way, and then we can hit. And then I'm open to any questions that you want to fire at me. So I'll just share my screen here with you. Hopefully this works. Give us a thumbs up if that comes up. Where are we? Was it not sharing? Got me there, Polly?
Yep. Sharing's
Cool.
going well, mate.
Perfect. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of review and preview stuff. So how I review and preview scrums in particular, that's the subject we're on. And there's three different ways you can look at it. In my eyes, you can the satellite, helicopter, or microscope. For us, microscope is camera 4. That's the close-up view, and then the wide view that sort of gives you a bit of an understanding of, okay, well, how's the scrummaging been? How's it flowed? What's worked well? What hasn't? And I shared these couple of questions with Brendan Pickerel at the New Zealand at the under 20s last week, and I said to him, I said, no doubt, you referees, when you review your game, the first thing you think about is the calls that you got wrong. And I said, I think you got to challenge yourself and reframe the questions when you are refereeing games and go, well, what are you proud of in your game? What could you have done better? And how can I help, as in your referee coach, whoever that might be? Because otherwise, you're just going to beat yourself up. And I compare it to hookers at the moment, going around all the franchises. All they're talking about is the throws that they're getting wrong. Well, that's just going to beat you up. So I think that the more you can challenge yourself on those areas and be a little bit open, I think is really important. Passive words will be passive actions. What I mean by that is front row meeting in the sheds. Be really clear. What are your expectations? No grey. Keep it really simple. If it's crouch, bind, and set, if it's a gap, well, that's what it's got to be. And I'm really big one on the players aren't working for you, and you're not working for the players. We're working with each other. So I think your language in the sheds is really important, that we all work with each other, and then you'll get your best outcomes. And in my experience, the referees in the middle, the ones that have worked with both front rows, have had the better outcomes because they've been really assertive in their language. And I want to go a little bit deeper on that around seeing things, say it and fix it. And there's a couple of examples where I'm going to present to Mike Fraser, hopefully this week, where I've got some scenarios where I believe in the weekend where the same message was delivered by the referees on the field as it was delivered in the shed. Now, for me, I don't believe that's good enough. I think that there should be calls made early. Not we talked about this in the shed, boys. We're not putting up with this during the game. A couple of things last night. Sort it out right then. If you've already talked about it in the shed, why talking about it again on the grass? Because I believe that's where we can keep the game flowing and fix problem solve on the run. Otherwise, you get to that second, third scrum in, and boys, we've talked about this in the shed. I want a gap. No, we're pre-engaged on the far side. Well, you talked about that in the shed. So I think that's a big part of how you can work with the front rows, is a little bit in your language and how it's delivered. I'm going to show a short video what I believe sums up scrummaging. I've played it every pre-season since I've been coaching for the last 10 plus years, I guess. And it's one that we start with. So I'll play the prezzo, and then you can write down hopefully this video plays okay. Write down your notes of what you've seen.
Please don't hold me back. Please don't hold me back. No.
So that video there is something that I've used every pre-season. Obviously, from the start to the end, there's your different pitches, and you will see those as referees. And I'm sure that you can compare the first part of the rowing boat where you got guys learning to row, and the last part of it is they've got their setup right. They understand what working as a unit looks like. There's so much synergies in a rowing boat as there is in a scrum. For a scrum, we get power through our feet when our feet are on the ground. For rowers, they get power. That boat won't move unless the blade is in the water at the same time, and that's how they get their efficiency of movement. Now, that's the perfect scenario. That's the perfect world, and scrummaging isn't the perfect world. But if you can think about those pitches and how you can see different situations unfolding, where it might be you're refereeing a junior team, it might be your under 18s or something like that. They're not going to have the stability. They don't know how. That's where, as coaches, we can help coach that. So they do understand that if they are stable, if they have got good balance through the bind and the set, that'll make it easier for better outcomes in the scrummaging. Now, believe it or not, you might be searching for probably a little bit of gold in this meeting, but I coach so simply when it comes to scrummaging, and I stick to in my everyday scrummaging activities when I'm coaching, right from the West Coast through to the All Blacks. I always have every single scrummaging drill where the crouch, bind, or set is in place, because they are the fundamentals that referees want. They are the fundamentals of the game that World Rugby want. So if the boys are set up for that and they've got those good three processes in their setup, they're going to have a pretty effective scrum. If I show through some, oops, hang on, sorry, boys. I'll just show through a couple of setups. These are some clips that have been around for a while, but that's the great thing about scrummaging. Like, there's actually not a lot changed, and I think that we are in a good place from World Rugby down. I think when you look at the World Cup last year, the ball in, ball out, the stability rate was right up there, and that's to do with a lot of work that's gone in with players, coaches, and referees, which is what I said before around working with each other. So if I play a couple of clips, you've got to start in your setup. Clearly, that's around your alignment, what you're looking for, your hookers left of the mark. If I show this one here. So there, I'm hoping you can see this okay on the screen. Give us a thumbs up, someone, so I'm not.
Yep, no, it's all good.
You're all good, Polly.
Yep.
Those hookers marks, the break foot's a big one, and so it should be, because we don't want leaning and we don't want axle loading, through our spines and through our hookers' necks. But here you can see that these hookers basically are straight on. Their foot is basically dead in line with each other, which means that they can't.
Here, new man Marley Pierce coming in on the loose head.
And then all the weight shifts, so they're not left of the mark. So I'm a big believer, and I say it at scrum time, the boys hate it. But if our gap isn't right and we're too high, I blame our hookers. It is that simple, because they are starting our scrum. They are, the coccyx or whatever it is in the rowing boat, if you want to use that analogy. They start the scrum. So from when you put that mark in the ground with your foot and they go left of the mark, if you can get that delivered with really good, strong language and confident, I believe it sets up a massive part of what happens for the rest of the sequence of the scrum. If I go to another couple of examples here around a good break foot.
Pass that got intercepted. Crowd is it honest? Top bloke that he is. That's what's on his mind, but he's had a good shift as well.
So you can see players getting ready to get their trigger foot back on the bind, and they get back to nice and square. They're square. Hooker's break foot is still out. A really good, simple picture. And that comes from, again, I'm probably going around in circles saying the same things, but it's the hooker that sets that gap. He is the out of all the people in the scrum that you want to work with the most, I believe it's the hooker. If you can build a good relationship with your hooker, work with him, this is what I need, and he will soon give you feedback. If you think they're leaning, often it can be the number 8 shunting that weight through, but the hooker will feel that. You're pre-engaged. Okay, well, why is that happening? Work with your hooker and find a couple of solutions with him. But if you stick to that absolute key point of that hooker in the shed, we need a critical break foot. We need a good gap. I think you'll get some good outcomes with your scrum during the game. Your classic balance pitches or not over leaning, it's usually the common picture that you see there is straight-legged. When your players are straight-legged, as opposed to that nice knee bend at the 90 degrees. So again, I'll play through a couple of these ones.
Every professional sports venue and team there is in the whole.
So I'll just get rid of that commentary. But here you see, if I just slow the frames down here, you can see the loose head in the white there. He's just completely straight-legged and just channel it, just pushing. He's pretty much standing up, isn't he? So it's just a clear picture. And look, the referee, where he's standing, he might not see that. And you don't see everything as a referee, but that's where your AR boys need to come in and they need to step up. And they need to see the pictures, because that there's pretty much, I'm sure, in the 5 meter channel. So that's a cue that could be helping you when you're on the other side of the scrum. It's a clear and obvious picture. Down they go. Straight-legged. Overreaching. Hinging down. Here's a great example of brilliant balance, a credible break foot, and it's not over leaning. There's a good gap. I mean, I don't know. I think Yako, he's trying to sort of get in there at hooker, isn't he, by looking at that picture, but he's getting a bit excited. But I think, I'll actually use Yako as an example, if you don't mind. I believe in all my time through Super Rugby, I believe he is the best prepared. You talk about reviewing a game. He previews very, very well, I believe. He does the work. He does the work beforehand, and he sees the pictures, and he'll have a yarn to us or the hookers. This is what I need. So we can cover that later. There's your rowing boat. That's a good picture, and often I hear this, England and France, and it's all messy scrums. It's all bullshit. They get it right if it's controlled right by the man in the middle. And the expectations are clear from the start. There's no grey. good competition, good competing, ball in, ball out. Again, I'll show through the drone view. Now I know you won't see that. A little bit of movement, but the scrum stayed up. Ball in, ball out. Perfect. Trainings, big one for me is no resets. I just don't allow them. We do not accept resets at scrums, and that's a big part of our process. And it can be, I believe, no different for you boys when you're out in the middle. And if you see a reset scrums, put it on the front row, boys. I don't want any resets today. If you boys can stay up, we're going to have a good day. So instead of talking about resets, talk about staying up. Because as soon as you give them a picture of resets, well, that's what you're thinking about. That's what you're seeing. It's what you're feeling, as opposed to your language. Boys, I need you to stay up today. Front row, boys, I need you to stay up. Slow builds. This could be an example of, again, your senior teams, even your rep boys. They might go at it, at the start, but you might just say, look, boys, we need to build into our scrum. I need that gap, and I need us to build into the scrum, and you'll get a feel for it. And if you're refereeing with your eyes, like I like to coach with my eyes, you'll be able to do solutions and work with the boys on the run. Even though you haven't got this training part, I get that. It's still a big part of how you can deliver it on the field. That's sled work and wrestle work. That's just an example of what we do at trainings and so forth. But I'm trying to sort of put it in context for you boys as you get a bit of an overview of it. So I guess in the perfect world, if we look at scrummaging and we think about the rowboat, and we think about everyone just being in a straight line and having our gap through the crouch, you want your gap, exactly what I've got there. You want your arrows all nice and straight. You want to be balanced. And then on the bind, we're not head on head. We've still got our break foot, but understand that they are going to come together. They are going to come together. And whether the gap's a big gap or a short gap, what do you think is needed? If there's a massive gap, is that going to cause more hinging? Of course it is. If there's a gap that's controllable, that the guys can handle with holding it up, and your classic case where you see a big tall loose head against a short tight head, or vice versa, and it's like, oh shit, okay, have a look at the sizes in the shed, and when you're doing your message, go, okay, this could be a little bit niggly here. I'm going to have to bring them closer, as long as you got the gap. And then on the set, well, that's probably reality. Sometimes you might have one team with straight arrows and heading in a straight line. The other side of it could be a fucking shit sandwich. And then that's rugby, and that's sometimes scrummaging. But I come back to the point of demanding that gap, working with your hooker, and challenging the boys to stay up. I think in your language, you'll get some good results. I've often used the game of Jenga. This is just to give you another picture. You pull a couple of blocks out, or you take a rowing oar out of the water, well, it's going to affect something. So if you are literally seeing the picture of a loose head who just can't get his bind up, work with him. Come closer, straight arm. But don't get stuck on that one block if the rest of the scrum is going okay. There's a bit in there, boys, probably, but and ladies, if there's some in the room, I'm not sure, but there's a little bit of an overview without hopefully getting too complicated. But I'm open to any questions that you might have. Fire them through. Hopefully you got a little bit of gold out of that, but yeah, just let us know what you need from here, Polly.
I might just open to the groups around the country and here if people have got any questions. I might start it off with one way the other groups get themselves sorted. But Mate, we've seen quite a difference this year in Super Rugby around the outcomes at scrum time. Like the Aussie teams are a lot better. Last few years, it's always been when you get a New Zealand derby, the scrums have been pretty good. And then when you get a New Zealand team playing an Aussie team, they're a little bit average. And then when you get two Aussie teams, they've been terrible. What do you think the difference has been this year?
Yeah, I'm not sure you saw the Brumbies game last night, but I think Fletcher Hill won seven penalties. Oh, look, I think the engaging seems to be better. I think that that both teams seem to be on the set wanting to hit, which creates a contest, which is good. I think that it's probably a flow-on effect of the progress that we made at the World Cups, and the language is a little bit more aligned. And I think that, we've continued the good work of ball in and ball out from the World Cup. I think there is a pretty good template now, to be honest, Polly. And I think that the conversations like these and that are flowing on, there is a common language: crouch, bind, set, gap, hookers, break foot, stability. It's a couple of fundamentals that I think is ingrained around the world. The Six Nations started off as a bit of a shambles, but it got there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yep, cool. Any of the other groups want to go first, or anyone in this room?
Yeah, I just talk about the hookers break foot being quite key, and I think something I don't fully understand, but we get asked a lot on weekends around the half set with that break foot, that moving on bind to halfway. So what role does that play? Is it something we should accept? And what is the effect of that on the scrum?
That's a great question. That really is, and that's been a little bit of a topic at the moment. Personally, I believe if you need to go to 3/4 and get a smaller adjustment on it, just make it work. But if it's going right back and the feet are square, no, you can't allow it. Keep it simple. That answer it?
So just on that, mate, how difficult it is for a hooker to hook keeping a full break foot?
Well, a full break foot, yeah. It's tough. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen a dog trying to root a golf ball, but it can be a little bit of a shambles, to be honest. I think that you've got to be able to adjust if you can. And I think when you've got that full break foot, like all the way out, like a split stance, what I mean is someone taking off out of the blocks at a 100-meter sprint in that position, that's no good. If you can get that heel up a little bit off the ground with your front foot, that's going to help. And that's that 3/4 picture I think that you can see. As soon as your heel was flat and all the way out with that knee bend, no good. But I think we're getting there. We don't want to get too stuck on that. I think there's going to be some stuff come out around what's acceptable and not, and a good couple of clear pictures. But what I will say is, look, if it gets to 3/4 and you trust your eye as a ref and go, well, actually, we're good there, no problem. But if it's a full adjustment, and it's sort of almost the foot square and then the front rows lean forward, it's a pretty clear picture that, well, that's probably not a 3/4.
Cool. Any other groups?
Jay, so I'll just throw one in here from the mighty Manawatu. What would a good pre-match brief sound like to you, or what should we be thinking about there?
The big one, I believe, is you got to make eye contact with the front row boys, and I believe that your ARs need to be standing beside you, because it's a team effort. It's a real joint venture. when it comes to facilitating the referees, and sometimes that can be just reinforcing that you're looking forward to put. It's not standing over top of the boys. It's just really good language, and you say, men. If we can have, sorry, Sarah said if, that's real shit language. That's passive language when you say if. I'll make the mark. I expect a clear gap. Good balance. When the ball's in, stay square. And we'll have a contest. If there's any issues, I'll be working with you, Cody, or the hooker, whatever it is. I'll work with you. Not your work for me. I think again, Mike, it's a good question. I think it's something that you can just be so clear on it. When you go off on a tangent and if they're binding and if I see this leaning, don't even talk about that shit. Just talk about what you want and what your expectations are to see, not all these scenarios, because otherwise it becomes grey, it becomes messy, and it becomes cluttered. And then what can happen is in the situation in the scrum where it turns into a little bit of a dogfight, you get them in and say, boys, this is what we agreed on in the shed. And this is what our expectations are. Be really clear. Don't get caught in scenarios and overreaching and if your locks are coming off their knees, and just stay away from it. Keep it simple, clean, and effective.
Awesome. Any other groups? Anyone in here?
Ollie,
Jim?
yeah. I'll ask a philosophical question. At
This will be
line out,
deep. This will be deep, mate.
yeah, it will be, but I tell you. No, so at a line out, two teams can compete. So at a scrum, two teams should be able to compete. So why do referees interfere with that competition once the ball is in and the contest has started? Why do we then need to intervene if we think that someone's doing the fellow prop over by taking an angle? It's part of a competition.
What's your view on that, Matt?
I don't agree with the question. I actually believe that we're in a good spot at the moment. And, if you look at the games in the weekend, for example, the dominant team was rewarded. And they were rewarded because they were going forward and they had a better dominant pitcher. And so they should be. There's a number of scrums in the weekend where the dominant scrum was rewarded. Look, you're not always going to get things right. I make fuck ups every week. But I think that if you go back to the clear expectations of what you wanted in the start, it is a contest, and we do love that contest. But if you've got a prop who's angling straight in, and then he lands on his guts and he's facing the number 8, penalise him.
Cool. Mate, I got a question. You talked about knees up, coming off knees, not coming off knees. Can you just kind of elaborate if a team is already up off their knees versus, and I'm talking about the locks here, versus coming up off their knees? What are some of the differences in why do teams come up off knees versus starting up?
Yeah, this is another good question, Polly. And I believe I'm not actually sure about the answer for it, if I'm really honest. I look at the Hurricane scrum at the moment. They're probably the best in the comp. In fact, they are consistently. Their locks are on their knees. I look at my coaching experience. I've only ever coached locks with a split stance. And my belief around that is, why go on your knees when you always scrummage on your feet? But I remember coaching Don Bird years ago, one of the tallest locks, to play for the All Blacks, and having a conversation with him about it. And I wanted to do him a split stance, and he said, "Mate, I'm not strong there. I don't feel strong." And I said, "Thank you for helping me out there. Let's go with what you're comfortable with." So that's the first part of the answer. If you get your locks that are comfortable on their knees, and this is probably more a coaching point, no problem. Put them on their knees, but understand that during the crouch and the bind, they can't be rocking forward. They've got to be balanced. And I think that the hookers and the number 8s, because they're usually the only ones that are on that split stance during the bind process before the set, they've got a bigger probably role to play when their locks are on their back 5 effectively are on their knees. But I can give examples, probably, talking to Tyrell Lomax with the Canes, the All Blacks were on our feet. Will we stay the same? Not sure. But he said, mate, I feel really balanced with our locks. We're not over leaning. I think it could be a little bit of a picture that's painted that for a while, Polly, where there's this image or perception that they're on their knees and when they come up they're going to be over leaning. I don't believe that's the case. I think you need to look at each scrum genuinely and see if that is actually happening, that on the bind they are rocking forward. But I think for me, when I'm coaching it, where do you feel strongest, son? Remember having the same convo with Sam Whitelock about it, good God bless him, not the most flexible thinker in the world, but when you play 100 tests, you don't need to be. But he said, I feel stronger because that's what I've always done. I've always been on a split stance. But it comes back to, dare I say it, that start point with the hookers. If they feel like they're a full break foot and then the locks come up off both knees and all that weight's coming forward on them, they're going to find it really hard to get their foot back, because their front foot will have 80 or 90% of their weight on it, and then they've got to go to 0 to get it back. Whereas when they sit at 60-40, it's a little bit more efficient in their movements.
And that is the big risk of teams coming up off their knees, is that they rock forward. If they're good at coming straight up and holding balance, it's no problem.
Yes.
Anyone else in here got any questions they'd like to ask Jace?
Hey Jace, Dan Moore here from Canterbury. I just wanted to ask, you talked about that no reset philosophy. Is that for you setting up your language, and that's just something that you set up pre your training, or are you challenging the process on the field that we should be making a decision rather than going to a reset?
I think it's a bit of both. I think a lot of my language, like at trainings, I don't talk about resets. I talk about staying up. It's the same when I coach our maul. No mauls to go to ground at any stage. We stay on our feet because that's where our power comes from. And I think if you start talking about resets, it gives you a mental picture, isn't it? Talk about what you want. It's the old classic, don't put the knife in the toaster. I've always wanted to do that, because you get an image of it. But talk about, don't throw stones. Oh, fucking hell. So give the picture of, boys, I need us to stay up. If you start talking about the resets during the week or you're on the field, it'll give them a mental fucking picture and a little bit of self-doubt in that passive language, because they'll start thinking, I can't have a reset, as opposed to, I just want to stay up. Classic one, loose head props bind. You got a bent elbow. Instead of talking about that, just talk about keep your arms straight. So your language will give them a picture. But to answer the other part of that question is, at trainings, we just do not accept them. No way. And they know.
Cool. Anyone else?
Jace, just at the risk of getting into the technical side of it, in a very simple terms, is there a couple of triggers you can give the referees around what does a tight head angle look like versus what does a loose head angle look like? At the risk of going too technical on it?
Yeah, I think that's all good. I think that your tight heads, you really need to see that square picture. When they're square and hitting straight, they're at their strongest. Your loose heads, if they're hitting up and then in, that's a good picture. If they're hitting down, they're going to hinge. But if you see them, your loose heads hitting up, your tight heads hitting square, I think that's a pretty good indicator, Mike.
Perfect.
Right, mate, I got one more question to go, but I'll see if anyone else has got another question before we close up. It's been great, mate. Anyone else? Speak or forever hold your peace.
We got one
Right,
more
mate.
here.
Oh, yep.
Maddie's coming in here. I think it's
Hey, Jace. Just a question around the number 8. From time to time, we see the number 8. We call it slingshotting at the bat, and we're obviously trying to manage them to be in on the blind call. What would a team's intention for the number 8 to slingshot from the back be, given that they need that stability on the set call before the feed?
Yeah, probably. I would say that they're trying to win the hit and get an early hook and just march over the ball would probably be the first part of that, I think. The other side of it is the other scrum might have them under the pump and they might be just trying to get out of it and chase through the hit.
So it's pretty important then around that, Matt, to be able to see what our 8s are doing as well.
Yeah, and it is, and that's another good point. I think that where you stand can be. We talked around the satellite, helicopter, and microscope. If you're standing as the microscope, just looking at a bind, that's all you're going to see. Because if you stand back a little bit, and you can just get a feel for the scrum and how they're both engaging, both packs, whether or not it's the rowing picture or whatever, I think you'll get more of an understanding of what's actually happening in the whole space. So not getting too fixated, just stand back a little bit, and then you'll get a bit of a feel for what you can see in front of you. Look, it's not always easy to see, and I must admit, when we do trainings, calling them on the run and living in decision-making world where you boys are on the grass making calls, it's not easy, but I believe that if you are standing back a little bit more, you're going to see a little bit more, as opposed to getting too fixated in one spot.
Cool. Okay, last question for you from me. Your day's turning to shit at scrum. You can't get anything to work, and you want to get through your day as a referee. If you got any nuggets of what you should do with them?
Free kicks. I don't know. Yeah, there's been a couple of those. There hasn't been too many lately. I think that, if you find yourself in a bit of a hole and you think, shit, we're not getting any outcomes here, go to your ARs and just say, right, boys, we need a bit of a reset here. What solutions can we come up with to get this ball in and ball out? But at the top of my head, I would say usually it's a shit sandwich if the gap's not right. Because if it's a bigger gap, like a massive gap, you're going to get hinging, you're going to get teams, the weight, the pressure's going to shift. So just bring them in a fraction closer. That would probably be my one thing I would go to at trainings if it is a bit messy, and often you get that at pre-season, and the classic case where you get all your super boys come in, they've all got their own scrum system that they've lived by, and then we get them to want to scrum like the All Blacks. The closer I can get them, probably on that gap, I think helps. It's a classic case with probably how I coach now around the scrum machine. Your scrum machine's a boxing bag. It doesn't hit your back. Whereas the live scrummaging, that's where reality is. So when there's that uneven contest, you just got to bring them up. And I think that some of the dominant super teams have probably done that well, where they actually haven't hit at all because they can't. And they haven't, so they just close it up, close the gap up, and then just fly into it. And that's probably a part of the sort of question that someone asked around the contest of props.
Cool, mate. Right. Thanks for your time, mate. 45 minutes, just about bang on. So that's perfect. I'll let you go enjoy the rest of your Sunday, mate. So if we got anything else out of it, I'll come to you during the week. But really appreciate your time, mate. There's some gold nuggets in there.
No worries, Polly. Happy to help. And if there's anything that I can help with any of you, or if anyone ever wants to send me a clip to get a little bit of advice on, Polly and Mike and the boys have got my number. You're all doing a great job. It's a thankless job at times being a referee, but we need you. If there's anything I can do, sing out. But the main one I want to get across is the more you can work with the boys, the better outcomes you'll get. And I think that's a big way of us all moving forward and getting some good outcomes. But you're all doing a great job, boys. So enjoy the rest of your morning, and thanks very much.
Cheers, Jace. Thanks, mate. To the rest of you guys, we'll see you at in an hour's time, 11:15, eh?
Thanks, T. See you soon.
See you soon.